drive. Okay. Welcome. This is day four. Day four of what is the Future of Information Alliance's Marathon Week, and we thank you all for being here. My name is Allison Druin, and I'm the Associate Dean for Research in the iSchool, and I am one of the two co-directors of the Future of Information Alliance.
And my name is Ira Chinoy. I'm an associate professor in the College of Journalism, and I'm the other co-director. And we welcome you here today. This is the fourth day of this week of programs, and it's been great. And basically, we've envisioned the university as a think tank without walls, and you are all now part of that think tank to think about some of the big challenges connected with information and then identify research opportunities and to move forward with them. So we thank you for being here. We also wanted to just let you know that we have, in addition to you all on campus, we have 10 outside partners, what we're calling them founding partners, National Archives, the Museum, National Geographic, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, the Park Service, National Geographic Society, Sesame Workshop, the Barry School, and WAMU Radio. Take it away, Allison.
And then in addition to that, we have all of the colleges here on campus that have, the deans have graciously given support to this endeavor as well. And it is probably one of the first times we've had that support, as well as through the Vice President for Research's office and the Vice President for, give me Brody's office, Communications?
University Relations.
University
Relations.
Relations.
But we knew that.
Yes, we knew that. Okay. To all of you, thank you. But all of you, what are you here for? Well, this is the second day of our themed discussions about the future of information. And today we're going to talk about the promises and the problems of an era in which free-flowing information raises issues having to do with security, privacy, and ownership. We live in a time when the response of governments is both improved access and obstacles of transparency. So it's basically, we're going to spend our time first hearing from some esteemed faculty on our campus talking about these issues. And then we are going to be, we're joined by our visiting futurists. They have been here. I know they keep waking up and saying, is it Friday yet? They have been here since Monday. It's so many wonderful events here on campus. And they are joining our faculty that are focused on e-government, mobile computing, social media, and more. So what's going to happen today is the faculty will impart some amazing talks to you. They'll then end with a question to our futurists, and then we'll have some discussion and go from there. So I have the honor of introducing, every day I seem to have the honor of introducing our futurists. Let me just point out that they come from Google, Twitter, and Microsoft, and they're here to brainstorm with us, to respond to what we've been doing here at the university, and to inspire us to move forward together as an alliance to think about the future of information. So let me introduce briefly our visiting futurists. Okay, first up is our founding visiting futurist. Dan was with us. I know, you feel so old, Dan. He was with us last year when we started to think about the future of information, when it was only a forum, not an alliance. Dr. Dan Russell is a research scientist who works at Google as Google's Director of User Happiness and leads efforts to improve the effectiveness of web searching. He is sometimes called a search anthropologist because of his focus on understanding how people use the tools of technology to amplify their intelligence. He's also held positions at Apple, IBM, Xerox PARC, and he wanted me to say something about where he was born, but we nixed that. Anyway, please welcome with me Dan Russell. Next up, Dr. Mary Shawinski is a research manager of the Visualization and Interaction Research Group at Microsoft. They call themselves VIBE, okay, if that tells you anything. This actually means that Mary leads the main HCI research group at Microsoft. Mary's research focuses primarily on novel information visualization and interaction techniques. She also studies information worker task management and multitasking, and her background is in visual attention and multitasking. Please welcome Mary. Okay, and last but definitely not least, but latest to come today, yes, is Dr. Abdur Chowdhury. I can't say his name right no matter what I do. Anyway, Dr. Abdur Chowdhury. And he was, until about a month ago, the chief scientist at Twitter, where he worked on search recommendations, extracting the signal from the noise. Previously, Abdur was chief architect for search at AOL, I think you've heard of that, and held positions at Georgetown's Computer Science Department and the University of Maryland. Yes, he was here in the Institute for Systems Research. Abdur actually went to Twitter via an acquisition of his startup company called Surmise, and we are happy to have him here. Welcome, please welcome Abdur.
So before we begin, I also want to introduce our moderator, who'll come up here in a minute, Dr. Sherry Parks. She's an associate professor of American Studies here at the University of Maryland. She's an interdisciplinary researcher whose work combines ethnographies, cultural and textual analysis to trace how attractive information is woven into the lives of individuals, families, and cultures, as well as social activism. I want to know about attractive information. I like that. Dr. Parks is the author of Fierce Angels, which traces the sacred dark feminine through Western religion and various popular culture media. Currently, she is researching virtual blackness, how black social activism takes shape via social media. She has designed and will be teaching a new course in social activism and new media to be included in the new graduate master's degree program in social activism. If her voice sounds familiar when she gets up here, it's because she is a longtime NPR host and contributor, and now the cultural contributor for Midday with Dan Rodericks on WYPR. Baltimore, Dr. Parks is a founding member of the Future of Information Alliance Brainstorming Board, and we're really, really glad she agreed to do this today. Thank you. So give her a large welcome.
So, will the panelists, you want to stay there? Okay, all right. New technology changes information into quicksilver, fast, fluid, flowing past older boundaries of nationality, community, and personhood. Yesterday, we discussed how art was influencing technology, and technology was influencing art in ways that the ancients would have recognized, combining aesthetics and function and interest. Today, we will discuss how information is reworking other fundamental categories through which we have arranged ourselves, most of which came into being in the West since the Enlightenment, that other information revolution, from the cognitive to the cosmos, so that now we are redefining how we are us. And that's my little teaching moment. And now we will hear from our faculty panelists, and first is Dr. Sahar Mohammed Khamis, who is an assistant professor of communication here at the University of Maryland, an expert on Arab and Middle Eastern media, the former head of the Mass Communication and Information Science Department at Qatar University. She holds a PhD in Mass Media and Cultural Studies from the University of Manchester in England, and is the co-author of the book Islam.com, Contemporary Islamic Discourses in Cyberspace, published in 2009. And among her publications, she has also authored chapters in 2 books with related topics. She's received a number of prestigious academic and professional awards, and she is a member of the editorial boards of the journals Media, War, and Conflict, Journal of Middle East Media, Journal of Arab and Muslim Media Research, and Advances in the History of Rhetoric. Dr. Paul Yeager, who holds both a PhD and a law degree, is assistant professor in the College of Information Studies here at Maryland. He is also co-director here of the Information Policy and Access Center. His research focuses on the ways in which law and public policy shape information behavior, particularly for underserved populations. He is the author of several books, more than 100 journal articles and book chapters, along with 7 books. Dr. Yeager has received a number of prestigious grants for his research, and he is co-editor of Library Quarterly and co-editor of the Information Policy book series. Dr. Ben Peterson is professor of computer science here at Maryland and a past director of the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. He is also co-founder and chief scientist of Zoomobi, a mobile app company started from his research with colleagues at Microsoft. He's well known for his work on what many people call zoomable user interfaces. So when someone zooms on your iPhone, MacBook, or iPad, Ben's research may be the reason for it. He's also well known for his work in children's educational technologies, including his notable international children's digital media. He's also a dad, which I think helps a lot. In collaboration with Professors Allison Druin and Ann Weeks, people we know, this website contains the largest freely available collection of children's books from around the world. Lucky kids. More recently, Ben works on what is now called human computation, an approach which combines human skills and expertise with computers to solve problems at a scale and quality that neither could accomplish alone. So we are in for a treat. So now we turn the program over to Sahar Khamis.
While they're working on that, they told me that today the combination of registrations all week that we've had have been, give me the exact number, I think it's 1,500 or so? Yes, over 1,500 registrations for people at the various different events that we've been a part of. And we are so happy you are getting started. Thank you so much, Sahar.
All right, thank you very much. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you in this very important event in the amazing Future of Information series of events this week. And I want to particularly thank Ira for his help and support in putting together this presentation that I'm going to be sharing with you this morning. The title of the presentation is The Arab Spring and the Sulia Project, Youth, New Media, and Prospects for Political Change and Intercultural Dialogue. So basically, I'm going to be talking about two different topics, but they are very much related in terms of their importance and the reliance on new media technologies. The Arab Spring or the Arab Awakening, and also the need for intercultural dialogue between young people cross-culturally, as exemplified in the Sulia Connect program. Both of them are very important examples of how we need new media technologies and how they can be put to use. So the first important thing is to talk about what is the Arab Spring, and here we have it in English and Arabic. I'm glad that there aren't too many Arabic speakers because the letters are not connected, so nobody is going to notice that, hopefully, if I don't tell you, but I told you. Anyway, so what is the Arab Spring? It is, of course, the term Arab Spring or Arab Awakening is used to describe the wave of political revolt or political upheaval that has been sweeping the Arab region as a whole. And I'm sure many of you have been closely following the events in many parts of the Arab world that have been unfolding recently. I think that, as we always say, one picture speaks much more than 1,000 words, or a picture is more powerful than 1,000 words. So if you look at this picture from the heart of Tahrir Square in Cairo, you see that millions of people have actually gathered in this very powerful and strong wave of human coexistence and what I call a historical moment of sharing and unity to topple the Mubarak 30-year dictatorial rule in Egypt. The Arab Spring or the Arab Awakening has been characterized by a number of very important features or characteristics. There have been popular movements. Protesters started all with a very peaceful approach. Violence and repression always came from the regimes or the government sides. And there have been a range of different outcomes or results. Let me just focus on the first part, the popular movement, because I think it's very important that they have been mostly or largely across the board grassroots movements that encompassed everybody across different age groups, gender, males and females, liberals, conservatives, Islamists, secular, you name it. You can see everybody at the heart of Tahrir Square or other parts of the Arab world where the Arab Awakening has been taking place. And the peacefulness of the revolutions that have been unfolding is also very important. The fact that demonstrators and protesters have been always using peaceful methods to get their message across, but they have been excessively faced by repression or violence from the ruling regimes. The range of results, of course, as many of you know, are not the same or equally shared in every country. Countries like Egypt and Tunisia have already had partially successful revolutions, and I say that because getting the president out of office is one thing, but transitioning smoothly and safely to a democratic society is a different challenge all by itself. But other countries are obviously struggling, like Syria and Yemen and Bahrain. So if we say, where is the Arab Spring? If we want to take a look at the geographic location or the geographic positioning of the Arab Spring, we can look at this map here. It started with Tunisia, it moved to Egypt, and then Libya, and then we have the unfolding or ongoing revolts in Syria, Bahrain, and Yemen, which are still very much now underway or still very much in the midst of their own struggle for achieving democracy and liberation from dictatorship. Who is the Arab Spring is an equally important question to ask. We asked about what is the Arab Spring, and we asked where is the Arab Spring, but it's equally important to ask who is the Arab Spring, the people, the faces behind this very important wave of sweeping change. As I said before, variations in age, socioeconomic background, religion, and political affiliation is an important feature. Also described as leaderless, but I would take this with a grain of salt because, in fact, the movement was launched and led by young people, and they started a number of years back. It's not like they all happened spur the moment or on the spot, as some people might think. There have been, for a number of years, attempts in many of these Arab countries to try to shake the autocrats or the dictators in power. It is just that they never attracted enough people to really create some kind of significant impact or enough change. There have always been like hundreds of people going out and easily cracked on or crushed by the ruling regimes. So that's why the role of the social media comes in putting people together. So where does information fit in all of that? Authoritarian regimes have always controlled the media for many years in the Arab world. Many of the media outlets, particularly broadcast media, have been largely controlled and dominated by dictatorial regimes in the Arab world, which did not give much room for civil society to thrive or for opposition activists to really make their voices heard. But protesters found ways to spread information and calls for action using social media, and I have this very interesting picture here, which is this protester holding the sign or the banner, and you can see the word Egypt. Actually, he's using all of these symbols that come from social media. So it's a very, very powerful picture that speaks for itself. And that's because social media played a very important and very active role in terms of being a catalyst for a political change and a very important instigator for social action and for networking among the protesters. Some of the young faces who are behind the wave of Arab Spring or Arab Revolution have used the social media in a number of very effective ways in order to get their message across. One of them is the young female activist Asma Mahfouz, the 25-year-old young Egyptian activist who came to be known as the bravest girl or the most courageous girl in Egypt. Why is that so? Because she put on or she uploaded her own vlog on YouTube, and she actually called people for action, for going out to the street and doing something and shaking the Mubarak regime. And I would like to share this short video with you, and then we will continue our discussion.
انزل البيت، ابعت مسجات لاصحابك، اكتب على النت في كل حته، وعي. انت عارف الدايره بتاعتك، عمارتك لوحدها واصحابك وقرايبك، بس قول لهم انزل معايا، نزلهم 5 ولا 10. لو كل واحد فينا نزل 5 و10 ونزل بيهم لميدان التحرير او ميدان اللازوغلي او في اي حته عشوائيه حتى، ويتكلم الناس ويقول لهم بقى كفايه، بدل ما نولع في نفسنا تعالوا نتكلم ونسجل موقف، ده هيفرق وهيفرق كتير قوي. اوعى تقول مفيش امل. طول ما انت بتقول مفيش امل هيبقى مفيش امل. طول ما انت بتنزل وبتسجل موقف هيبقى فيه امل. اوعى تخاف من الحكومه، خاف من ربنا. ربنا بيقول ان الله لا يغير ما بنفس حتى بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بانفسهم. ليه؟ مش علشان ان انت تبقى كويس وقاعد في حالك وماشي جنب الحيط، الحيطه هتقع عليك وهتقع علينا كلنا. انزل وطالب بحقك وبحقي وبحق اهلك وبحقنا كلنا. انا نازله يوم 25 وهقول للفساد لا والنظام لا.
So as you saw in this very strong, vlog, right? She really was inspiring and instigating people, especially young people, to go out and to make a very important stand and position against the 30-year-old dictatorial regime of Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. And just a small mention here that she did actually get detained after the revolution because of her criticism of SCAF, the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces in Egypt, and she was, detained for a number of days, and she was facing actually military trial, and then a lot of pressure from political activists and opposition groups was able to free her. Another young female activist in Egypt, Nawara Nigm, who happens to be a relative of mine, by the way, is a prominent blogger and political activist, and she has been using her blog very actively, as well as her Twitter account, in order to inspire young people to engage in activism and to take action against the regime in Egypt. And she's holding here a small, banner that says, this is from WikiLeaks. It says, Omar Suleiman, who was the nominated or chosen vice president by Hosni Mubarak before he left office, is Israel's first man after Mubarak. So she was trying to tell people that, don't trust Omar Suleiman, he might not be the right man for you. And, of course, that was before Mubarak actually left office. She was trying to get people not to trust Omar Suleiman. So she's been very outspoken and very vocal in terms of her criticism, and she's been using the social media to do so. Some of the other young faces of the Arab Awakening or the Arab Revolution have been Wa'il Ghunaim and Abdurrahman Mansour, these two young men. They created the Facebook page called We Are All Khalid Saeed. And this is the English page of We Are All Khalid Saeed. It has an Arabic page and it has an English page. And this page was created in order to really celebrate the memory of this handsome young man that you see here, Khalid Saeed, a 28-year-old accountant from Alexandria who has been brutally beaten to death by the police officers in Egypt because he dared to upload a video on YouTube that actually revealed some of the corruption of the police officers. So in retaliation or revenge for his deed, he was brutally beaten to death, and he became a martyr, and he became an icon, an iconic figure for the revolution. And this page in particular, We Are All Khalid Saeed, played a very crucial role in terms of inspiring people, mobilizing them, networking them, and helping them to stay connected and to rally behind the cause of political change and against violations of human rights in Egypt. You can also see this woman, and by the way, women played a very important and a very crucial role, both online and offline, in the wave of the Arab Awakening. And I'm sure you all know about Tawakkul Karman, the first Arab woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011. I see this as a nod to the Arab Spring and a nod to women's role also in the Arab Awakening. This woman here is holding this banner that says, bring Wa'il Ghunaim back alive, and another victim of Mubarak's emergency law, who will be next? So it's a very powerful way, again, of making her point and making her voice heard. Here is Wa'il Ghunaim, the founder, or one of the founders of the We Are All Khalid Saeed page. Again, he is in the heart of Tahrir Square, and he is trying to rally people and to mobilize them. And all of these pictures are found on YouTube. You can find a lot of powerful images and pictures and videos. If you search on YouTube, you'll find a lot of these resources available now through social media and new media. So why is the focus particularly important on youth leadership? Young people are the fastest growing segment of the population where reform is really needed. They are 70% of the population of the Arab world. So if you look at this Arab awakening or Arab Spring, you can very well tell why these young people have been so effective. They form 70% of the population. Not only that, but they are also agents for change with their own open-mindedness, desire for reform, creativity, energy, and determination. And they are very much technologically savvy, very clever, and comfortable with using new media tools. And we have seen examples of how they were able to put their technological savviness and cleverness and skills to use in terms of using blogs, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, you name it, in order to advance their cause for political change and reform in many parts of the Arab world. So why new media in particular? New media accelerate the speed and the spread of information to a wide audience. They raise awareness of corruption and repression. They mobilize and coordinate resistance. They provide platforms for brainstorming. And they keep up pressure after the revolutions. And here I would like to make a small comment on the different functions that can be played by different forms of social media. As they actually played themselves out in the Arab awakening or the Arab Spring. Facebook was used mostly for networking purposes. So people would put up a cause and they would ask people to like this particular cause or this particular page, and people will network together using Facebook. Twitter was much more effective in terms of on the ground, on the spot organization. So people would tweet to each other and say, I am now in Tahrir Square, I am being beaten, I'm being attacked, I'm being tear gassed, help me. Right? And there is a publication that came out that's called Tweets from Tahrir, very interesting, and it's a minute-by-minute recording of all the tweets that came out from Tahrir Square at the heart of Cairo in the midst of the revolution. And YouTube was much more effective in terms of audiovisual images, like the vlog that we have seen by Asma Mahfouz that she uploaded on YouTube, while of course blogs are much more effective for brainstorming, exchanging views, exchanging ideas around topics for discussion. However, I would like to shy away from over-exaggerating or overestimating the role of social media. We should not overestimate or underestimate the role of social media because they do have their own limitations as well. They can really be catalysts for political change. They can advance political causes, but they are not magical tools. That they cannot bring political change all by themselves. It is the people, especially young people or the youth, who can bring about actual change on the ground. So we have to stay away from these, two extremes of overestimating or underestimating the role of social media. We should see them as catalysts, as accelerators for political change that can aid or supplement the process of political transition, but cannot do it all by themselves. So what if these qualities of young people and their comfort with new media could play a leading role in terms of promoting understanding across national borders and across different cultures before conflicts actually arise? In other words, prevention is better than cure. What if we can really tap into these resources, these young people, their vision, their energy, their political desire for change, as well as their savviness with the new technologies? I have to give you here a small example from an experience that I've actually went through and played a leading role in, which is the Sulia Connect program, which is a youth-led intercultural dialogue project that links young people across different cultures and across different contents, across nationally or cross-culturally. And you can see here the Sulia project is actually available. It's www.sulia.net. And it connects young people across the West and the Middle East through internet-based communication, promotes values of tolerance, conflict resolution, and interfaith dialogue, and has been successfully implemented at the University of Qatar, as well as the University of Maryland, as part of my Arab media course here on campus. You can see here some examples of how this program actually works. It connects these young people through windows. They all share the same information session at a set time, once or twice a week. They all get together online and they exchange thoughts and ideas through live internet dialogue. And here's an example of one of the participants in this Solia Connect project, making a point about how she found this to be a very interesting and useful resource. She's saying, I think it's nice, we don't have all the same opinions, so you really do get a discussion. So the results here, very briefly show how the percentage of students agreed or strongly agreed that they had a good understanding of the views of people in the US or Europe or the Middle East after their participation in this program, and what kind of impact it had on their ideas and attitudes towards the other pre and post, or before and after taking part in this program. So the challenges that lie ahead are very important. We have a number of very important challenges ahead of us. Finding effective means through which affordable technology can be used to bridge not only cultural barriers, but also spoken languages. In other words, can we actually think of some innovative new ways through which we can instantly translate languages? Because now the Solia program is only provided in English, only in the English language. Can we find some effective ways through which young people can communicate cross-culturally and cross-nationally using instant language translation? That's a question maybe for the panelists to talk about. And we have to think about the stakes have never been higher before, but the opportunities have also never been bigger or greater than today. Thank you very much.
They're going to come and answer. After Mary?
I thought I'm finished.
You're cued. They're going to answer your questions briefly. Yeah.
So now, Sahar, do you have a question to ask the panelists?
Question to ask the panelists?
Yes. Is this the question you would like for them to? I didn't know if you wanted to reframe it. Or.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think my question would be, how can we actually use the new technologies in order to address the challenge I just talked about now, which is how to use new techniques or new methods to actually enable young people to communicate with each other instantly, using new media technologies across cultures and also across linguistic barriers. Would it be possible to find a way for them to understand each other even if they're not sharing the same language instantly?
Well, as you probably know, Google's got a translation mechanism, and we've done a couple of things recently. So for example, very much like the project you showed, we have in Google Plus now this feature called Hangouts, which is effectively the same thing. You can have a bunch of people simultaneously having a video conference, and that's just part of the Google suite of offerings, and something you can do. We don't yet have live voice instant translation from language to language, but you can sort of see in my role as futurist, that's going to happen in the not too distant future. I can talk to Siri now, I can talk to my, my search box on Google now, and it sort of translates it from my spoken language into whatever internal form it does. So you can see that that's not too far in the future. But I really like this idea that we have now the connection of all these different kinds of technologies. So I can, for example, drop in a page of Arabic text and see it in English. And I can search in English for stuff in Arabic. So this is now just something you can do. And I think, to your point, the more that young people start to use this, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, Bing has translation as well, and I just used it to speak to a Greek family, and I was amazed at how good it's gotten. So I think it's coming very, very soon, and with things like Skype and Google Hangout and so on, we can bring groups of people together now, and the translation is getting really good.
I think the young people are already finding ways to do this stuff. I'm always shocked at how creative kids are or young people are. When they want to solve a problem, they'll go find a way. And so they can already do the translation, they can cut and paste into various things, they can do all this stuff right now. I think the bigger question is, how do you get more awareness here in the US from kids? And there's just not kind of this driving desire from the younger generations here to really understand all the problems these other kids are going through.
Well, to your point, one of the things I find really interesting about kids and using social media is, you're right, they pick it up very, very easily. And what I find exciting is that they can find new ways to use that media. So for those of us who are older, we invent something like a Twitter or G+ or something like that, and we think of social media communication. And then kids co-opt it and use it in really interesting new ways. And I find that fascinating. So as people build new kinds of technology, look for adaptations of that in ways that you hadn't anticipated. So for example, people setting up their primary Facebook account, you know kids who do this. They set up the one that mom and dad sees, and then they set up the other one that's for their friends. And they keep posting to mom and dad's, you know what I mean. You've seen this happen. But what they're doing is they're basically figuring out how to do a subterfuge, right? If you're in a politically challenged environment, this is a great skill to know. And Abder's right. 14-year-olds know how to pass this information around.
But if we take the example of the Sulia Connect program in particular that I just gave now, what would be the most, smooth and, non-intrusive way to have some kind of innocent translation that would be accurate, so you don't have meaning that's, lost in translation, as we say, and at the same time would aid these young people to communicate cross-culturally and understand each other?
Did you want to say something very quickly? Oh, okay. Well, and thank you.
Okay.
Oh,
Can
okay.
let
I'm
me
just trying to do as I'm told.
No, I
Yeah, I thought-
understand.
I thought it
You're
was-
doing the right thing.
It's
I mean,
the
there's-
same question.
It's effectively the same question. You're asking sort of how's the architecture of this going to happen,
Yeah.
and that's we'll do this in a computer science colloquium. but I think one of the interesting things about the impact of your question is that with open source software and with publicly available APIs, people can very quickly build tools to help work around. So a great example to know about is the Speak to Tweet program that a bunch of Google engineers put together. So when Egypt turned off the internet switch, the workaround for that was cobbled together by a couple of Google engineers to basically allow people to dial a magic phone number, leave a message, which then would get translated into text, and then tweeted on that account. So that was a great workaround, which is a great way to answer your question.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. And now we will turn it over to Dr. Yeager.
Howdy. So I'm now going to be talking, trying to stand out of the spotlight, about what? Here. Microphone. Oh. Go for it. It's on. Okay. Yeah, but if I use this, then I'm really far away from switching the slides. So I'll just stand near the spotlight. Okay. That is a compliment. We're going to be talking about sort of the inversion of the last presentation. Just as social media is allowing wonderful new ways for government transparency. Can't hear you. Okay.
We're going to move it.
All right. So just as just as social media is allowing members of the public to bring transparency to government by, as was shown, bringing to light activities of the government, organizing people to change the government, governments are also using social media as a way to try to communicate, interact with, and bring services to members of the public. So you have, on one hand, with this, a tool that is transparency from the people, and you have transparency to the people. And so today I'll be using the example of the US government and their use of social media to talk about how the use of these tools may be leaving out some segments of the population. And the reason for using the US government as an example with this is multiple. First off, since the advent of e-government, the US government has been very enthusiastic about adopting new features, new approaches, new tools. We also have the interesting thing that in the United States, for about 45 years, according to the Supreme Court, information access is considered a fundamental part of freedom of expression, and thereby information access is actually a constitutionally protected right in the United States. And finally, we have an administration in the presidency currently whose use of social media as a candidate was enormously important in becoming president and influencing not only other subsequent approaches of candidates, but also heavily influencing the approach of the administration in use of social media and the wide embrace of it. So there are a lot of opportunities, obviously, if you are a government, for using social media to bring transparency. You know, the U.S. has a lot of different initiatives from monitoring budget and spending to the data.gov, where it's, here, have a bunch of data, see what you can do with it, to the challenge approach of offering, here are problems we have, see what you can do with it as a community. Other governments have taken approaches to ways of using social media to limit bribery possibilities and to speed up going through processes of applications or approvals, or to monitor how government government dollars are given out in terms of making sure that an agency is giving the lowest bidder a grant. So we see generally there are about 3 buckets you could put these opportunities from a government perspective into. One is democratic participation and engagement. Another is co-production. And the third is crowdsourcing solutions. And I've just given sort of backwards examples of all of these. Some ideas cut across these. There's nearby here, there's the city of Alexandria, not the same one as mentioned in the last presentation, Alexandria, Virginia, where they have a group of, the city government in coordination with a group of nonprofits have created a website to try to, what I would call community source solutions. That is, the city government can bring forth problems, the nonprofits can bring forth problems, and then through the website, the nonprofits, the government agencies, the individual volunteers in the community work together to figure out, okay, what are we going to do to fix this? And they've attacked problems from a local food pantry really needs baby formula up to much more complicated issues. But all this coolness is really only possible as involving the entire community, the entire country, whatever level you're talking about, if equity of access exists. And so far, government use of social media, in the United States at least, isn't translating to widespread citizen embrace of government use of social media. From the good folks at Pew Internet, we know that a fairly robust seeming, almost a third of internet users are government social media users. But the catch to that is almost everyone who's using government social media was already using traditional government websites. So what that works out to is you're really not bringing new people into the equation in terms of dialoguing, communicating, getting services from the government. And a surprisingly robust number of people who are internet users aren't even sure if this is a good idea yet. And so lack of usage could come from not only the, I'm not sure this is a good idea, but also real limitations that affect certain communities. Availability and geography is one of the problems. Simply living where there is not infrastructure to support being a part of the online world is still quite possible in the United States. This is something that people who are in academia, policymaking, technology, seem to overlook quite a lot, but you don't have to drive far from the DC metro area to get to spots where you're pretty much not going to have the infrastructure. Geography plays a big part in that. Mountains, for example, or if your town is a 9-hour drive from the next town. I think we call that Wyoming, but there are lots of places where this is, surprisingly hard to get access. And it also can come from telecommunications companies not really wanting to put down lines to a particular place because they don't consider it financially viable. Economics is another issue. You have to be able to afford this access somehow. Whether it's a computer and a subscription to FIOS or whatever you get locally, or it's only a mobile device and a data plan, that still costs money. And we had seen a big jump in people who didn't have access before, going straight from not having a computer to having a mobile device and a data plan. But as these new pay-as-you-go models start becoming more commonplace with mobile devices, that's going to seriously negatively affect the people who can least afford to pay for data. Language and literacy are another issue that comes into play here. Language is quite simple. The discourse at least using the US government example, in social media from the government is English-based. Now, you can come to problems like, we know another Pew study here, 78% of people in the United States who are Latino use the internet if they speak English. However, if you live in the United States, are Latino, and do not speak English, 32% use the internet. These are big gaps that come into play if you're delivering critical information, critical services, critical communication between the government and the people through social media. Literacy is another big problem. Not just literal, can you read? But this kind of interaction requires technological literacy, you know, what's often called digital literacy. Can you use the technology to get there? Or do you know someone who can help you use it to get there? And also, a much overlooked but really central thing here, government literacy. Do you know what government agencies are, what information they're going to be providing? Can you tell the difference between somebody from a piece of information coming from the NIH versus some Yahoo who has a different theory on how flu spreads? And finally, disability. The population who least is able to use the internet is persons with disabilities due to the barriers built into the infrastructure of the internet. The physical computer or mobile device, the connection, the websites you get to, oftentimes have barriers built into people with disabilities, and social media is no exception to that. There are also implementation issues when you're talking about government use of this stuff. Usability is a big problem. I don't know, perhaps in this audience it's less of, going to mean less, but when you have an average user encountering government presences on the internets, it's often difficult to figure out what to do if you are not having the government literacy. These aren't necessarily intuitively designed. They're often designed based on how agencies want to present themselves or schemes that aren't based around users. Accessibility, this goes back to the disability issue. This is, as I just mentioned, a really big thing. It affects both in terms of a usage and an implementation. Findability. This is something from our research that is really a big problem with government use of social media, which is just kind of not being noticed. At least it's being noticed by users, but not others. That is, this stuff isn't in one place. It isn't coordinated in how it looks. It isn't something, if you don't know all of the agencies, you're going to be able to sit down and say, hey, I want to find so-and-so on. And what happens is a lot of potential users actually give up quickly because they can't figure out exactly what they're looking for or find it. And consistency plays into this because this is a broader problem with e-government in the US, but you don't have a standard presentation, a look, something that signifies this is part of, this is authoritative. So what we seem to be in the position right now is social media seems to be following the pattern that many technologies do. They benefit the already technologically privileged. However, this pattern doesn't actually have to be the case, and we already have a very strong policy infrastructure that points the way out of this. And this is something, in thinking about this in policy terms, is extraordinarily important, insomuch as the internet itself, and then social media in particular, is becoming more and more central to being a citizen, to participating, to being part of a society from a governance standpoint. But it's also a broader, so there you're talking civil rights, but it's also a broader human rights issue as more education, employment, socialization, everything moves to being internet reliant, and in many cases heavily dependent on social media. Lack of inclusion in any aspect of this, but it's particularly vital in a government sense, cuts people out completely. So as we move forward with this and think about policy, we are really talking about legal issues, but also human rights issues. And so from the policies we have right now, we actually could do a lot more. The first thing is thinking about this really in an access and implementation as being inclusive approach. So instead of agencies adopting technologies, actually evaluating them, figuring out, okay, who do these miss? Can we work with the company? Or can we use a different alternative? Could we build something and accomplish the same thing? This notion of inclusive access is buried in all kinds of different laws. Just to use the disability example, we have Section 508, which the government is supposed to be holding itself to be using only inclusive technologies. It has more or less successfully ignored this for 13 years, but it's on the books. But there's also, when you're talking about inclusion and disability, the ADA, the IDEA, the other parts of the Rehab Act, the Telecommunications Act, the E-Government Act, all point to the same thing of this should be done inclusively. And that's just an example with one population. So following what's there would greatly increase equity of access. But you can also think about this in terms of promoting awareness and outreach. And this goes to the groups who are being lost in terms of findability, in terms of consistency. Increasing awareness of what government is doing on social media, why it matters, how you can find it, how you can identify it, how you can work with it. Some of the approaches that have been taken thus far on this issue have been, I guess, quixotic at best. There's a wonderful training resource that has been created by the federal government called digitalliteracy.gov. It's a wonderful basic training tool online, and that's the inherent problem. Going to a website that teaches you how to use a mouse presents difficulties for most users who need the website. And so it's great if you're in a library, a school, you're with someone who knows how to do this, can sit you down and say, I will take you here and let's learn. But in terms of just throwing things out there like that, it's a wonderful notion, but not the right implementation. And so we also need to think about how do we reach people on the technologies they're actually using. This is particularly important with social media and mobile devices, but designing for not just the user to make it usable and accessible and functional and findable and consistent, but also designing for the user and the platform that they're going to be interacting with the technology, with the social media on. And finally, this is the biggest idea and the hardest, making sure that your policy objectives harmonize with what you're actually doing. And the Section 508 example is a wonderful example of not doing that. Section 508 was signed into law in 1998, was supposed to have been implemented in 2001, and by that point, all government online presence was supposed to be accessible to people with disabilities. Since then, every study, the studies that have been really exciting have found into the teens percentage being accessible. The most recent one I read came out a couple months ago, and they had found 7% of government web presence was accessible to people with disabilities. And so you can have policy objectives, but if you're not implementing those objectives, you're not really doing anything productive. And so in this sphere, putting this in the lens of not only are we talking about a legal right to participate, but a constitutional right, a human right, linking up what policy is doing with what policy expects to be happening with what is actually being done is really vital to make sure that this way of communicating, interacting, providing services is inclusive of all these different populations that are in this country or any city or wherever you're trying to reach. So here's a few things which I'm not sure if this slide would even be readable, but that we've done recently on this issue at the Information Policy and Access Center here. And I guess we now move to the questions. Yes.
And do you have a question for the panelists?
Yeah, are they coming back up or am I?
Yes,
Okay.
they will.
Let's thank Paul.
Usability issues with the stage?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so my question for y'all would be, what could, from the perspective of the people who produce content, the backbone of the infrastructure of how this works, what could be provided from a government standpoint to incentivize the creation of things that are more inherently inclusive and helping, say, governments adopt more inclusive technologies?
Abdur.
Can't hear you, Abdur.
It
Picking
seems
on
like it's not a technology problem. There's a larger education problem before you even get to that. And like there's like a common theme for the last 2 days where people think technology actually is a person, has emotions, has an agenda. It really doesn't. It's just a tool. And right now, if people aren't on the internet or don't have access, technology isn't going to solve that problem. If people don't know how to use a mouse, technology isn't going to solve that problem. It can make it easier, but it doesn't solve the problem. Right? So accessibility, like if people aren't thinking about that when they do anything, technology isn't going to solve that problem. Right? We can build tools to make, any website easier for, text to speech. We can do all those things already today. It's just that people aren't doing it. And that's education. So I want to throw it back at everyone here. Like, it's just a tool. Go use it.
Yeah, it's almost like a campaigning issue, to get the word out there. I guess that's a form of education, using any kind of media to distribute information you possibly could, if it's a billboard or whatnot. But it seems like the word needs to get out there.
I have to agree. I know that's rare. but I think the issue you're getting at is that people developing the accessible, the findable, the usable interfaces follow the sort of natural force lines of opportunity. That is, they're going to do it when there's some money behind it, or there's some power behind it, or they're motivated to do it for some reason. People rarely build giant infrastructures like, say, the Taj Mahal for no basic reason. There's got to be some motivator there, right? But I will agree with your premise, which is one of the things is just paying attention. And we have to figure out how to teach people more broadly. So as an example, I was teaching a class, I teach often at classes on web search, and I was teaching at Santa Clara, an unnamed Silicon Valley library, public library. And we were teaching this class in Chinese, not me personally, but one of my associates. And we started teaching the class, we discovered that no computer in that library had a Chinese input method editor, which means you could not do anything in Chinese. And yet, a huge fraction of their population is Chinese. Wait a second, nobody noticed this? And so the librarians were really shocked because none of them were Chinese. And so it was just a simple awareness of accessibility issues, and the next week they had it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And now? Ben Peterson.
Thanks. You can leave the lights on for the first several minutes. I'll let you know when I want the lights down. But we can bring the house lights up. Thanks. So there are a lot of really interesting discussions going on today, and I've been really appreciating them. And there are a few key elements surrounding a lot of these things, which is when people participate in social activity, societal activities. And the Arab Spring is really important one. There are really important issues of anonymity and privacy, right? How much do you have the right to remain anonymous? Do you have to let people know? Can you participate without the government knowing who you are? Right? We heard examples of people having their public Facebook account and their real Facebook account. And these kinds of questions come up in just about every domain. So I want to spend my 10 minutes or so talking about these issues in the domain of learning. So I want to start by doing a little activity, which is why I need these lights, which just might be just a tiny bit uncomfortable. Yes, you and you know who I'm talking to. Can you stand up? What's your name? Andrea. What unit are you affiliated with on campus?
Oh, thank you. I'm with the iSchool. I'm an MLS candidate.
I see. Great. I have a task for you.
Uh-huh.
If you were going to search the web for, say, trying to figure out what do horses eat aside from hay, what would you type in?
Possibly, well, I could do a Boolean search. so I could go into an advanced search, probably on Google, and say horse diet, not hay, or something
Excellent.
like that. I'm sorry, but not everyone would know necessarily how to do that.
I'm asking
Yeah.
you what you would do. All right, so thank you. You're a good sport,
Okay.
and that's you had actually some pretty good answers. So with that context, I want you to sort of think about how would you all have felt if I asked you individually to stand up in this setting where you might have thought that you were in a sort of a semi-anonymous mode. Maybe your person next to you, right? You probably didn't think I was going to pick on you. That was not a plant. So now I want to do a slight variation on the experiment. I would like to take no more than 1 minute and have each table to work together without having the advantage of really actively using a computer to see if you can come up on any variations on what you might ask for. Well, I guess if you have a computer, sure, you can use it. But you only have 60 seconds. So now you have 60 seconds. Each table, I want you to talk amongst yourselves and see if you can come up with any other ways of thinking of what you might ask for in order to find the answer to what horses might eat aside from hay.
You're getting a high-priced education. Make it work, right? Bernie's good. Bernie has a lot of voices in his head.
Without the computer.
I know.
Without the computer.
The word feed is actually the word that they use in horse diet. They don't use diet. They say horse feed.
Yeah, horse feed.
And another interesting way to get at it, not the fastest way, there have actually been court cases of people who only fed their horses hay. They were prosecuted for malnourishment. Oh, really? Yeah.
But see, I can go back to the whole thing where I don't know the technology is necessarily giving me everything. I've worked for a long time. Sorry, I really would go back. Like, yeah,
All right.
not the traditional bag, but it's like, yeah, they love it after something like this. They really go with that. I think there's there's value that I get if I talk to this. You would trust the information more. I think it's a amount of information. I think I could get very factual information online. That subjective stuff, if I have, I want to go to a human. If I don't know somebody, right? But either that or like what I do when I have problems with my pets or whatever is I post something.
Okay, 15 more seconds. Put together your best thoughts.
Right, exactly. So I look for that, or I look for a community of people who are host horses and say, you know what, things you never read about are blah blah blah. You know, so exactly the experts. Right, yeah. You're lacking flag extension.
What is our answer? What is our answer?
Okay. So, which tables? Raise your hands if you feel like you think you might have made some progress on thinking about how to do this. Any tables? Okay, so this table over there, can you all stand up?
I have a mic.
The second table, yeah, all of you.
Oh, man.
Ira, can you give him the mic?
Who wants the mic? There you go.
So, can you tell me, one of you, what?
Here's a second mic. Here you go. Here's a second mic.
So, what were some of your other ideas about what you might search for?
We actually kind of stopped after 20 seconds because we decided we would just ask, what do horses eat on it? And we thought we'd immediately get answers from like Wikipedia and places like that where we would just find those kind of answers.
So just ask, what do horses eat? Just right, be absolutely direct. Great, okay, thank you.
Is that it?
So all right, one other table in the way back.
In the way back, here.
You guys are ringers. You can't answer.
I think I originally thought the same thing, and then I was trying to figure out, like, how would I change that? So I figured, what if I just got more specific on the type of horse? So what does a racehorse eat, or what does a pony eat? Just to see if that might generate a different answer.
Right, okay, thanks. So the point of this little exercise is to think about how, first of all, how different it is to work in non-private, non-anonymous mode, right? It's different when you're just in your own head. It's different when you stand up. It's different when you're talking to people at your table. Some of you knew each other. How many people here felt like they knew every single idea that came out of their table before anyone else spoke? A couple. I mean, I certainly would have, because I already spent a long time thinking about this particular question. No, I'm joking. I bet you I wouldn't either. In fact, I didn't think of that one. The reality is, the most experienced, the most knowledgeable among us in just about any domain still have things to learn from others. And it's very hard to learn from others if you do it entirely on your own. There are social elements, there are informational elements, and so it raises this question of when you're learning, should you do it on your own? Should you do it and take advantage of the people around us? So technology, of course, has the opportunity to potentially help because it enables us to communicate, it enables us to learn from others, and it brings up very clearly this trade-off about anonymity versus privacy, right? At least you guys, even when you stood up, right, when this room, disperses, we're not going to have a really much of a record, except I'm not sure, Evan may have taken a picture of you standing up, someone might have recorded you, but more or less, what started in this room is going to stay in this room, and that doesn't happen with technology. So there are, but as I said, there's multiple ways that technology can help you think about learning. One is social, but the other is other kinds of motivation. Technology can be a game, right? It can pose new questions that you might not have thought of otherwise. So I want to show you a couple of technologies. The first is something that Dan, our futurist, has brought back from next year for us. How many people here know about a Google a day? So a handful of you. Dan, you've heard of it? Now you know about it now. So a Google a day is a place you can go to have some fun and be motivated on things, on what you can search for. So I'm not going to spend a long time doing this, but I'm going to look at yesterday's question. You'll need diving gear to visit if you don't have a computer, don't do this just yet, because we're going to do this together in just a minute. You'll need diving gear to visit most of the Earth's longest mountain range. Where does it extend above the ocean to form its largest island? So the idea is, here's a question. It is something that some clever people have found as something that it's a non-trivial question to answer, because there often isn't a single web page where you can just ask the question. You can't just ask what a horses eat and get the answer. You have to do a little bit of piecing together. There's some other cool things in here, like hints, a timer. It's actually using Google's index only through the day before the question was asked. So you can't see social answers to that question, which I think is very clever. So that's kind of a nice thing. It motivates you possibly to think about search. But Dan's getting all of the answers, right? You're not learning how other people are answering this question, and you can't use your friends to help you ask explicitly. So there are other approaches to this. In fact, Mary, one of our other futurists, worked on a much more social approach. She had a great visiting intern, Nima Moraveggi, now a grad student at Stanford, and I'll say a previous undergrad working with me here at Maryland, to spend a summer building a tool called Class Search, which Mary mentioned briefly on Monday, which is a way to get students in a classroom to search together and to do their work individually, but to collectively see what the others are doing. So I saw that and I said, wow, that is just brilliant. I really, really like that. I asked Nima where I can use it and how we can use it, what website we visit, and he has all kinds of other cool things he's working on, and so that project was dormant for a bit. So I said, I can do that. So I recruited Alex Quinn, grad student, raise his hand, and for the last several months, we've been building a prototype that I want us all to play with, and it is called Search Party. So now's the time where if you have laptops or netbooks or tablets or phones or other internet access devices, open them up, find a web browser, and visit this URL, search-party.appspot.com. And this is something that is very, very much a work in progress, so who knows what's going to actually happen. I've never used it before with more than about 5 or 10 people. So the idea here is to try and collectively see if we can find answers to questions and think not only to find the answer to the questions, but learn about searching and learn about how people think about those questions and think about how they would look for that information. So I'm going to log in as a teacher, and I'm going to want you to log in as a student. So click on student. I'm logging in as the teacher. So here's the collective view, which is going to aggregate everybody's work. And what you're going to do is you're going to log in to this same website, search-party.appspot.com, log in as a student, where you're going to type in your name or pseudonym. So we're sort of not quite fully anonymous. And you're going to type in this list lesson code, 27805. Oh, see over here? People are logging in. Excellent. So this is one of the cool bits of this technology is it's entirely web-based. There's no server, there's no proxy servers are set up. You don't have to install any software. Everybody just logs in. We're making some progress here. And what I can do is I can see, well, we'll start over here, what queries people are typing in, right? So if people that aren't logged in, I'll show you what they're doing. Sorry, let me log in as a student, and we'll go back over there in just a second. What you get is a search box, and you can type in stuff. I'll just type in probably a bad query, mountain range. You get some search results. When you click on it, you get an embedded view of that page, and you can say, no, that's not really helpful, and try again. So that's what each student is doing. As they're doing it, we can see what searches are going on, along with whether or not the person doing the search, thought that query was helpful or not. Right? 2 people searched for this underwater mountain range. And so we can collectively be looking to see what people are doing. We can see what might be being effective by seeing whether people thought it was effective. And we can see this in lots of different ways. So first of all, I can just look at the different things. This is all of the words that were queried. A lot of mountain, a lot of ranges, a lot of versions of Earths. There are a lot of things we know how to do to make this better that are not yet done, like do more aggregation, more collection, but you can see that these were all grouped together, even though many of them are slightly different. We can see what links were followed and which ones people rated as being helpful or not helpful. I'll delay clicking on the answer just yet. These are answers that people typed in. We can also drill down. So when we have queries that were...
Do you want to ask them to lower the lights just a hair?
Oh.
For the people in the back.
Sure. Can you lower the lights back to a projector version? Thanks. We can drill down to see which queries people voted effective, and now we can look at the sort of anonymity issue, right? We can see who typed that in, right? So Joe and Kay Daisy typed these things in. We can see what words they typed in, what links they followed. And so this helps us to both give people credit. I'm not going to pick on you right now, but you can imagine in a slightly smaller setting, if someone had typed in an unusual query like humanities, I might ask Nikki why she thought that would help her answer this question.
HCI up there,
H is clearly trying to make some point of some kind. When is lunch? All right. Amos, see me after class. Right now, this is as far as the drill down goes. We are working so you'll be able to sort of drill down and aggregate in many more ways. we can now see now that's been running for a while, we can see that variations of mountain and range were in fact considered to be helpful. Longest was helpful, right? Kind of interesting. Ridge. So the sort of standard words in the question were good. Underwater, which is kind of interesting because underwater wasn't in the question, right? So where did that come from? Well, so this might be a case where we can see what the queries that people performed to get underwater from. We can look at, maybe they got it from Hawaiian Islands, or we can ask, hey, Greg, why did you type in underwater?
Just because it said it extended above the ocean, so that means that it was probably under the ocean.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Very clever of you.
Thanks.
Okay, and we can look at answers, and we can see there are a lot of people typed in Iceland. That seems like that has got some possibilities, so we can... all right, that seems like a pretty precise answer. Thank you, Kay Daisy. These are all people that typed in Iceland, and so we might talk to them. So the point is, right, we did something collectively in a way that would have been hard to do individually. We got a sense of what kinds of things might have been helpful in a place, in an environment that we really were more seriously trying to study this. We might have used this to really drill down into the content, to really drill down into why people were asking or searching the way that they did. We're envisioning that this kind of tool can not only be used to help people search, but also use this as content, so when you're studying some other content, let a class collectively discover information and learn what they discovered and what they accidentally discovered, what they shouldn't have discovered, right? So this can also be something that is very contentful. And this concept of having a social activity in a classroom where we can aggregate what people are doing and then drill down into who's doing what isn't limited to search. Right, so we can also envision that this concept can be used on any classroom activity computer-supported classroom activity. I'll just put in here, if you're logged in, you want to play. In fact, it looks like some people have. I typed in some of the Google a Day searches for the previous 5 days. And so you can see maybe some people started to play with some of these questions. Some of them are kind of hard. I had to look up some of these words myself. So I think, oh, okay, thanks. Dan says me too. So I guess the question that I will close with is, under what circumstances should we support real anonymity? And so under what, in other words, how much is anonymity a right? In what circumstances should real identity be required? Because I want to know who H is. Right? Under what circumstances is non-anonymity required? So, or, the world often says, well, it's your choice. Pseudonyms are kind of a balance. Sometimes, Google Plus started saying we're going to have real identities, and there was very strong pushback on a large scale saying that was unacceptable. Are there settings where real identity is acceptable? So this is my question, trying to understand these balances and how they can be used. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Futurist? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and join in.
Thank you, Ben. That was great. So many years ago, Victoria Bellotti, who's an ethnographer, anthropologist, worked for me, and she did a really interesting study at San Francisco Chronicle newsroom. This is actually pre-instant message days. Remember those days? And it turned out that the journalist in the newsroom had a kind of chat facility. It was sort of on a VT100 terminal. I mean, it was back in those days, right? But they had one line at the top of the screen where they could actually chat to everybody else in the room. So, and what would happen often is someone would call the reporter And she'd be on the phone and then chat. Does anybody know this crazy person I'm talking to? And it was a sort of shared collective space. I bring that up because it's a little bit like Search Party in that you're sharing amongst a set of peers non-anonymously with real identities what's going on sort of in the space. And that was a really important tool for them because it allowed them to ask in real time questions kind of like you would on Twitter, right, of people you know. In that sense, the population it was distributed to was relatively small. But you can think about extending that now in the modern age to doing collectively crowdsourced fact-checking. And what would that be like with a tool like Search Party, where we have potentially millions of people participating in a fact check, kind of like factcheck.org, one of these outfits? What would that be like? And what would it be like if I had a million anonymous people saying something versus people that I could track down their identity? And I think in that kind of situation, you really do want real identities. But I will agree that there are lots of cases, as you pointed out, you do want to be able to support pseudonyms and so on.
Yeah, when we did the class search studies, there was anonymity was never brought up, interestingly enough. And as I had said on Monday, many of the students actually usurped the technology to, like, for instance, get their name real big up on the board or say bad words, and the teacher had to run to the display and delete them.
I thought about doing that to Ben.
Yeah. And still, you know, it really wasn't an issue. They knew they were going to get in trouble, obviously, but they still did it anyway. They chose to do it. And the teacher really appreciated being able to see who was typing what. I mean, it was really informative to him or her. So I think in those trusted situations, you're sort of giving up your anonymity.
I just want to make a point about anonymity in the midst of the Arab Spring or the Arab Awakening, because it has been really a very important issue. You know, some of the governments have been more technically savvy than others. For example, the Syrian government has had more of a learning curve in terms of hacking into some of the political activists' websites and trying to trace some of the activists using their own IP addresses and trying to find out who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. So the issue of anonymity has been very, very sensitive in this regard. In Libya, there has been a very dramatic case of, you know, a political activist who was actually doing some broadcasting out of his own home. And he was being killed and attacked while he was doing one of the live broadcasts. Killed, and his wife came, you know, on YouTube and she said, my husband has just been killed by some of the Libyan, you know, police officers. He paid the price for, you know, sharing his identity online. So this issue, I think, is of extreme importance in terms of the Arab Awakening or the wave of change in the region. Yeah.
Well, you know, actually, an interesting aspect of this is there's the identity you share consciously and intentionally, like with your login or if your YouTube account or whatever, right? And then there's, even when you try to cloak your identity, you may not know enough of the technology to understand that your IP address will identify you within a certain region and so on. And on the other hand, if you know enough about the technology, you can use a cloaking service and actually then reroute it through these anonymizers. So an interesting question, I think, for all of us is how technologically sophisticated do you have to be as an individual to get the kind of anonymity that you desire? I don't know an answer.
Well, unfortunately, pretty technical.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
And of course, privacy is a moving target over region, culture, age. So it's not set. Are there comments that anybody up here would like to say as we wrap up? And then we actually have time for questions from you, so start thinking. Are there things you would like to say about today or about what you've been
I
thinking?
just have one comment for Ben. I like that. But my question would be, how do you get it so there's more than 20 or 30 people using this? So it's cool to get 20 people working on a shared task. It's small enough. But how do we get like 1,000, 10,000, 1 million, 1 billion people working on a problem?
I totally agree with you that that's what makes it really exciting. And I'm pretty confident that that is something that we're starting to think about. And that our current aggregations are textual lists, which are highly unscalable. But that's the easiest part to change, and everything else is scalable. So I think, you know, millions is really hard. I don't see any reason conceptually that, you know, for this, I'm not even searching, but for various kinds of information tasks thousands seems like that ought to be pretty straightforward. So, a question that came up on Tuesday night, how does the government decide which beaches to protect under global warming and which ones to give up? I would love to have this kind of, sort of collective technology to get 1,000 and then 1 million people to participate in searching for information, figuring out what kinds of things, resources people brought to ask that question, what their opinions were, and aggregate them. So aggregation at scale, I think, is a great, great, great question.
You're going to have to be very careful that people don't game the system, though. I mean, lots of protections
People would
against
never
that.
do that.
No.
Well, we'll start off with questions that aren't so important.
Well, one thing I'd like to say sort of on this topic is that I think it's important for each technology provider, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Facebook, all of us, to sort of take seriously that we reveal as much information about what information you've revealed to us as we can. So, for example, at Google, we have the personal dashboard. You can go see for every Google service and every Google product exactly what your exposure is, what you've allowed other people to see, and you can then modulate it and say, I don't want everybody to see my real name here, or I want to withdraw my authorization for this particular service. And it's all in one place. It's a fairly long page if you signed up for all possible Google services, but one by one, you can actually go through and see and change the behavior of it if you want. By the same token, we also have a page which summarizes all the governmental requests to Google for access for information. So many governments actually, for example, will ask for information from us from Gmail and so on. And mostly we say no. But occasionally, because of laws, we have to say yes. And next you can go through and see that. It's all aggregated on one page. You can also see on that same page what services are currently being blocked by which governments. So is Syria open today or is it closed today? Who knows, right? But you can go to the page and you can actually see that and watch the volume of traffic over time. So I think that's incumbent on all of us to be able to provide as much transparency as possible.
Yeah, but it's the it's the steps to get to Google that often reveal you.
Say more.
So the ISP that you log into, they'll reveal who you are, or you log into another website that gets hacked, that has less security.
Yeah, that's what we were saying about how technologically savvy do you have to be, and I agree. You need to kind of know a lot.
Okay, we have questions in the back.
Ben, you'll have to share it. Dan, I'm sure you can do it.
I agree with everything Dan says.
Okay, that's fine.
Ben, I think she's picking on you.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to ask, since many of the conversations have seemed to go back to youth and education as core components, I'd like to know the panel's opinion about the impact and role of school librarians.
I think they're great.
We should have them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No. We're all very for them, I think. The bigger question is who's going to pay for them, and that's the real hassle these days. Is as we're all school systems and so on are getting cut back. Well, let's talk about school librarians first. School librarians are under increased pressure to go away, right? This is a real problem. There have been lots of proposals all around the country saying, well, they can look it up on the web. Trust me, you need a librarian. You really do. Your best internet connection is a librarian. And so one of the things this means is that who is going to teach our kids how to do all this stuff? They need, as we've been talking about, they need to know a certain level of technology so they can understand what the implications of their actions are. Who's going to teach that to them? Currently, there's a lot of finger pointing. The history teacher points to the English teacher, and the English teacher points to the science teacher points to the math teacher points to the principal. And it's falling in between the cracks, and I think this is a travesty.
And one of the things that's happening when we talk about the divides, for instance, that Paul was talking about, is that there are schools where there are lots of librarians in private schools, and elite private schools that are working very intensely with kids and how to use the technology. So the technology is neutral, is catalytic, but it can either exacerbate the divides that we've been talking about or narrow them. But some kids are getting lots of librarians.
Right. You said it, elite private schools.
Yes, I did. Yeah. And that information divide is getting bigger.
And the technology is part of a bigger context with that. A school library in a high poverty area is going to have fewer print volumes, fewer computers by drastic percentages because schools are based on a model of funding tied to the surrounding community. So it's not only, you may have limited technology access and limited support for the technology access or no support, but then you also have fewer other information resources. So that lack of a librarian becomes more catastrophic.
Yes.
There's a question back here.
My question is about WikiLeaks and how replicable that technological ability to keep the stuff from the government but get the documents out still is if we never see Julian Assange again.
Dan.
Mary. Well, sort of by definition, leaks are very special one-time performances. And so the moment the leak is detected, somebody comes through, say a plumber, I love that word in Maryland, and fixes the leak, right? But then it springs out somewhere else. And I think, if anything, the past decade has really shown that the information systems we live in are permeable, highly permeable. And it's very easy to take a thumb drive in your pocket and just walk away with something, or to get onto an open terminal that somebody's left, or open laptop that somebody's left out. I see my laptop open there.
You should go check your sent folder.
Yeah, I'm gonna go lock it right now. But the point is, you can easily get onto somebody's device and just pick up a pile of data and zip it and send it out, and it's gone. This will continue to be true. I mean, the problem is not crypto systems. It's not 256-bit key, whatever. It's not the technology. I think one of the big points of all the discussion from the past couple of days, and presumably for tomorrow, is that people are the weak link in these kinds of systems. So it's not hard to get passwords. It's not hard to get access. It's not hard to do any of these things. So I think with respect to leaks, look for more of them in the future. It will continue to happen. So I think we have to come up with great remediation practices for ourselves when my personal identity gets leaked, and my credit cards and my SSN and so on get out there. How do we deal with the inevitable oversharing of information?
Another question.
Okay, my name is Shaq. I'm a freshman at University of Maryland. And what I heard a lot today was a lot about accessibility and also about building a movement and stuff like that. And so I'm wondering, how do you get, say tomorrow I'm just gonna build a website, and this website does a certain function or something like that. How would I get it to the people that I want to use it? I'm wondering if the panelists believe in build it and they'll come, or would I have to market it? And if I was to market it, how would I do that?
Get it to come up #1 in some of the better search engines, for instance. Tweet about it, get it out there, blog about it.
There should be some kind of viral component of the software you're building that allows the users of it to share with other people its existence. So if it's truly useful and does something interesting for the first person that uses it, hopefully they'll share it with their friends who have similar problems or needs. And if you can build that into the software, it can change and grow nicely. You don't have to worry about search engine optimization.
So another answer is exactly the same in an offline world. If you create something in the world that you'd like people to care about, then it needs to provide value to people. right? If you are doing something great, then to some extent people will appreciate it. But they still have to know about it. So so I'm going to say both two sides of the coin at the same time. You have to produce something that people really like. It's not enough; it's only good for you. And you can do all those things, but they can't do it if they don't know about it. So somehow you still have to communicate it to enough of the world so that its greatness gets discovered. So the answer is, it's never easy.
I don't believe in marketing.
So even Google a Day, Dan's brilliance, I noticed, is advertised on Slashdot. So, it shows up on the side. It looks like an advertisement to me. So,
But your question gets at what is community, and that really is, I think, at the base of the question. And so you can't shout from the mountaintops. How do you let that community know about you? And that really is what I think your question is getting at.
My name is Brian Henry. I'm a PhD student at the high school. My question is, I've heard a lot today about young people and the youth and the Arab Spring, et cetera, et cetera. What is the definition of young people? Is there an age limit? And my second question is—
1 year older than you.
And my second question is, what are you in the tech industry and so forth doing to think outside the box of that particular demographic?
Youth is a box. That's what you're saying. I love that. And I totally don't believe it. I mean, the youth market, the demographic, is the easiest target because they're the most active, have most disposable income, et cetera, all those nice things. I think to the theme of all the speakers today, we have to think carefully about how to get access to those additional people. And I know we spend a lot of time trying to get there, and I will argue that we haven't done the world's best job, but we're trying to improve that. And I think that's true for all the technology providers who are paying any attention whatsoever. The world does not consist of 24-year-olds living in Silicon Valley. That's the impression one gets, but it's not true. So I think we recognize that.
I think that in the case of the Arab Spring, the youth has been defined as the group between 18 and less than 35 years of age, and they're the group that forms, like I said, 70% of the population. But most importantly, they're the ones who have more access to the technology and the know-how of how to use the technology, which made them particularly very powerful and created some kind of trickle-down effect from this small critical mass of young people who are effective, influential, technologically savvy to the wider base of the population, many of whom did not have direct access to the technology. Going back to the point we said earlier about the knowledge gap, the gap between the haves and have-nots in technology. Not everybody in the Arab world, for example, have access to the internet or can know how to use a computer. But there is this trickle-down effect from this critical mass of technologically savvy young people to a much wider base of millions of people.
There's an interesting example if you pull back and look historically at the video telephone, which was market ready more than 50 years ago and was rejected twice because it violated the extant ideas about privacy. But when it came back, and this is a minute before Skype, it showed up first in nursing homes because grandparents wanted to see their grandkids. And so when nobody else was saying, everybody else was thinking, oh, where do I get my Jetson suit? So my makeup and my hair is done before I turn it on. And is it rude not to turn it on? And when we were all worrying about that, Grandma was saying, but I want to see my grandkids. And that was before Skype. So I think what we're saying is that if you give it to them, they will use it.
Okay, you guys are going to make me run.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a history major, and I work in the public library in DC. One of the questions that I have, stepping aside from the age question, a lot of mentions of translation came up today, and I was wondering what kind of role translation efforts are going to have, or what you believe translation is going to play a part in this inclusivity discussion that's been happening over the last few days.
I think it's going to be huge because I think video is going to be huge. I think it's going to be the medium of choice in the future. And I think all of these worries about how we look and whatnot are going to go away, although in our research it has shown that people are very happy also to kind of be cartoonified a little bit, so that if your hair does look messy today, you can maybe just use an avatar that still reflects your emotions and whatnot, and your lips move with your speech, but it's not exactly your high fidelity picture. So I think it's going to be huge, and machine translation is like critical to making that happen.
But I think one important thing to look for is the accuracy of the translation and the fact that the meaning is not lost in the translation. I remember one time I was invited to a talk here in DC, and they tried to translate it from English to Arabic. And it was very funny because they wanted to translate the word speakers, right, to Arabic. And I received the invitation, and my name was listed there, and it said the amplifier, Sahar Kamis. And I was like, the amplifier? What do they mean? And then I realized, oh, they're trying to literally translate the word speaker. So they use the Arabic word for amplifier. So you have to be careful to be accurate when you do this kind of translation.
This reminds me of a potentially apocryphal or photoshopped image of a banner in Japan, and I don't care if it's apocryphal, it's wonderful. It's a big banner in English that says, server translation error. You have to understand, they just cut and pasted the string that came back. And I think that sort of speaks to the fundamental problem. Translation services right now are only so good, and you still have to have a lot of world smarts in order to sort of validate that, and that's sort of the speakers/speakers. But it will get better over time. It's just one of these things, as Mary says, it's sort of inevitable as we get larger and larger data sets and are able to improve with a little bit more semantics.
The other thing is that in the interim, which may take a while, by the way, there are, when you really care about the quality of the translation, you can combine automated techniques and human contributions and collectively create high quality translations at significantly lower cost and higher throughput than you can by the traditional way of hiring a professional bilingual translator. And that's like many of these technologies, that's a very disruptive force, and it's problematic for other reasons, especially if you're a professional bilingual translator. But the reality is there are many cases where we don't need high quality translation, and the automated techniques are great. Like, I just want to get the gist of a newspaper article right now that I otherwise couldn't get and I'm not willing to pay for. And there are other times when you want to print a promotion and you really want it to be excellent, and so it's important to do that. But having collaborative or collective solutions that involve multiple people and computers together are a way to get high quality in a lot of domains that we are currently feeling anxious because we don't have a way to get there otherwise.
Hi, my name is Xu Rong, and I'm first year PhD student in iSchool. And I have one concern and one question. The concern of mine is that you're talking about cross-cultural perspective and the further development of technology today. But I found that I came from China, and my peers, many young people in China, were influenced by mainstream Western cultural system very much, and according to the globalization of technology, for example, Facebook, Twitter, or other multimedia in online environment. So my concern is that the cultural difference is vanishing, and the speed is faster and faster because of technology. So maybe we push too hard to young people in the world to into the same place, but maybe we didn't think about protect the cultural difference. And my question is, I was wondering how Google and Microsoft or Twitter think about cultural difference. What's the point of your view about cultural difference? And do you really consider cultural difference in your work and research? And if you do consider about this perspective, and to what degree you consider it? Thank you.
We do research in this area. We literally look at the psychological differences across cultures and how you would appropriately design for that, because there are attentional differences, translation differences. There are even differences in which orientation you print out an envelope in these cultures. And so it's not only important for research to be looking at this very carefully, it's also very important for Microsoft products to look at this very carefully so that their products are acceptable and usable in the cultures in which they're shipped.
Technology's not killing culture. It's not. It doesn't have an agenda. It's not alive. It's not killing culture. Okay? Let's be very clear about that. If culture is dying, it's dying because people are doing that, not because of technology doing that. I'm sorry, it just bothers me. Like, it doesn't have an agenda. It's not there. Like, if the young youth in China want to change or like do something else, they're going to do that. Technology may speed it up a little bit, but it's the people doing that, not technology.
At Google, we also, like at Microsoft, worry a lot about these multicultural differences. And another factor to take into account are sort of the local expectations. So for example, in Korea, we've done studies comparing Naver, which is the popular Korean search engine, versus the Google appearance. And as you probably know, Naver has a lot of stuff going on the screen, thousands of colors, lots of animated GIFs, all kinds of very busy stuff. Drives me crazy. But when we talk to Koreans, they say, why does the Google page look so barren? Don't you know how to code HTML? And that's literally the expectation. So we violated their expectations. And I don't think it's intrinsically Korean. I think it's what they have developed as their local internet culture, right? So when we think about these sort of multicultural issues, it's not enough for us to be bilingual. We have to have designers and developers who are bicultural, sort of deeply bicultural. It's not enough for me to be able to type Hangul. That's not going to cut it. I need to have people who can do that for me, who have really have deep language and deep cultural understanding in both worlds.
But to put everything together, I mean, you yourself said, I don't think we've thought about this enough. I mean, it's true. Languages are going away at like a amazingly high pace. And I don't think we've thought enough about that as a culture, as a world, as a global community. And it's not the technology that's doing it. It's the world is shrinking. And so I do think that it behooves us to give it careful thought.
And Ira actually has
one last question. We're 2 minutes away from being done. And just to remind everyone, tomorrow there's going to be our final panel on science in our lives. I have a quick question for Paul, which is, so I come out of journalism, and all across the country, every day journalists are trying to get databases out of the government that are not on the web. And a very typical answer after you get past all the forms of no, in its many, many flavors, is, oh, well, that's, you can have it, but it'll cost you $100 or $500 or $1,000, or the biggest I've seen recently to a student is $300,000. So the question is,
paying Zimbabwe dollars.
Yeah, but I like the Zimbabwe dollars. Okay, so the question is basically, is there, in what you're thinking about, should there be some kind of standardization, or should we not allow governments to set up information-keeping systems unless someone has thought about the way to get that information out to the public, or is that just not feasible?
It's not an issue of feasibility, it's more an issue of what your goal is versus what the government agency's goal is. A lot of data sets that are monetized are actually created to be very specific for a very specific user group, where it was something to keep it, make it available without it being available, that kind of thing. And when you keep in mind that as far as a producer of stuff, our federal government is actually the world's largest producer of content. There's a lot of different competing approaches to the information and provision, and so there's also all these fun security laws and many reasons why that can be used to make things not available. So we have a right to access information, but there's a lot of caveats to it. So the approach has never been, we'll make everything available, but the government use of social media has been to make more things available in easier ways or more usable ways. The GPO, Government Printing Office, now only prints just a teeny tiny fraction of a percentage of the things, the content that's generated by the federal government. Most of it goes straight to the web. And so that would be the availability, just randomly can you find it, or it doesn't go anywhere because it's internal or never meant to go out, or costs $300,000 for a data set, which I think is hilarious. So there's a lot of different approaches. There's no standardized movement to let's make everything available and see what happens. I mean, even the Freedom of Information Act has all these exceptions. So you see with the current administration a lot of enthusiasm for the technologies to make the information more usable for people, and depending on the next however many years of executive philosophies, if they're consistent, then you'll probably see more of that coming available. But we tend to have fairly serious swings in how different executives tend to view how much should be made available.
Well, all right, so I'm going to continue this conversation with you offline. I think we should start a movement. We've run out of time. I want to thank Sherry Parks, our moderator.
Sherry! Woo!
And our great panel. Yes. Let's hear a round for the panel.
Yeah.
And you can applaud yourselves, because these were great questions. We're really glad you came. And we hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you all.